Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 90 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening here at the end of September, and I am joined, as I often am, by Scott Coleman. Scott, this could have been a celebratory episode. Instead, it is let's just say we're contemplating a lot on this podcast. How are you?
Hey, Brad. Doesn't it feel just right that this season where so much has gone wrong, like injuries, bad luck, bad performance, the offense, all of the above, that now this team maybe doesn't have to play a game 163, but it kind of feels like a game 163 because there's no more regular season baseball other than the Atlanta Braves and the New York Mets now having to play two games. We're going to dig into that, but it is a real bummer that they were not able to kind of wrap things up today against Kansas City, because I think the vibe would be much better, quite obviously. And now we all just kind of get to have queasy stomachs for the next 24 hours and pray that somehow the Braves can win one of these two games on Monday and they will find themselves in the playoffs.
Yeah, so a lot to get to on this episode, including, as Scott just teased, a little bit of a preview of what is now a Monday doubleheader that's going to be happening no matter what. We'll also talk about the game on Sunday, in which the Braves fell short in a clinching opportunity. But we should also tell you at the top of the podcast that we are part of the Foul Territory network of podcasts here at Hammer Territory. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, where you can see our shining faces sometimes. Also, ratings and reviews appreciated. And tell your friends, of course. We have been doing shows all weekend as well. If you missed it, Friday night, our colleagues Steven and Sean did a podcast. I actually went solo on Saturday in a rare solo episode because it was just a Saturday night. We don't usually do a podcast there, but it was kind of appropriate to do so. So download those, listen to those podcasts. But look, the Braves had like a 95% chance in all the models to make the playoffs as of last night. And look, this might come up later on. Every single thing went right for the Braves on Friday and Saturday, which spoiled us on some level. Like, you don't bank on, like, basically it was a 6 or 7 team parlay that hit on Friday and Saturday, if you want to view it that way. And that did not happen today. It's obviously down to like the 75-80% range, as we can maybe come back to later on. So it's still, the Braves are in a good position, but queasy for sure, especially for, longtime Atlanta sports fans. Like, nothing is comfortable until it's comfortable, and this is not going to be that way. And it turns out Monday baseball would have happened either way today. The Braves could have clinched today with a win, but they would have had to play on Monday. It would have been kind of a farcical endeavor for the Braves, honestly, had things gone differently. But the Diamondbacks won and the Mets won. So that scenario where we would just be celebrating and going to the playoffs was never going to happen. But then the Braves lose. So now they have to win at least once. That's the situation here. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably know that. But the Braves have 2 chances to win one game, essentially. It's a little bit more complicated for the Mets. The Braves and Mets play, of course, in Atlanta on Monday. Doubleheader. The Mets have more variables in play. They could be the 5 seed, they could be the 6 seed, or they could be out. The Braves, it's essentially win 1 and you're the 5 seed. Win 2 and you're the 5 seed as well. So it's win, 5 seed, trip to San Diego, or lose both and your season's over. It's that simple, which is kind of crazy. After all the machinations, it could have been more complicated, but Scott, it's kind of straight ahead. Win a game on Monday.
Yeah, win one baseball game and you're in the postseason. And I mean, man, it is unfortunate for both New York and Atlanta that the hurricane wiped out those 2 games. And I know we're a baseball podcast. I do want to just take a quick moment to say that we are thinking of everybody impacted by the hurricane. I'm sure we have listeners in some of the neighborhoods and towns hit hardest. And obviously there are things far more important in life than a couple of baseball games. So we are thinking of all of our listeners out there and sincerely are hoping for the best. In terms of the on-field, it's a bummer that now the Braves and Mets have to play 2 games for sure, no questions asked. And the Braves, assuming they win one, have to hop on an airplane at 9 o'clock Eastern on Monday night and then fly.
If that.
Yeah. Fly 4.5 hours west to San Diego. There is a time change that kind of works in their favor a little bit, but the gist of it is the Braves are going to have a very long day of both baseball and hopefully travel on Monday night. But you know what? It is the way it is. On the other hand, the Mets just went from Atlanta to Milwaukee, then we'll go back to Atlanta. And if New York can win one of these 2 games, then they will go back to Milwaukee. the travel, yes, it's not ideal. These are also like millionaires traveling on private jets. They're not sitting in row 51F on a Southwest plane next to a screaming baby for 5 hours. But regardless, it is not ideal for any team involved. And we just have to hope that the Braves can win. Game one would be awesome just for like many, many reasons. And we're going to talk about that. But it is a unfortunate situation for both teams. And now we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and of course, as you might expect, we're going to dive into Sunday's game a little bit. It's kind of a secondary concern. Like there's some stuff to take away that looks forward, honestly, but also just, it's a game that happened. The Braves lost it. It was a frustrating one, but not out of the ordinary. It was kind of on brand for the season, to be honest, which will definitely be a topic in a moment. Before we get to that, though, and a preview, of course, of Monday, Scott, this is an unscheduled vibes check. I think people can probably hear in our voices we're not terribly thrilled at this moment, but I will just ask you plainly. Now that we've had maybe an hour since the game ended, since we're recording this podcast, how do you actually feel about Monday? Are you terrified? Are you pessimistic? Like, are you trying to let your smart, your logical side reign through and say, hey, you only got to win 1 out of 2? Like, where is your mental state right now? Because I think fans will want to know how we actually feel right now.
Yeah, on the logical side, or maybe the analyst side of my brain, I tell myself that the Braves need to win 1 out of 2 games, and the likelihood is that in the case they lose the first one, New York has literally nothing to really play for. Honestly, New York might want to lose game 2. Like, even if they win game 1, flat out lose game 2.
Yeah, other than the rivalry aspect of things with the Braves and Mets, and look, at the highest levels, I don't think that that's going to seep into decision making. There's always so much you can do to try to lose a baseball game. Like, they're not going to make it a total farce because the commissioner's office will get involved, all that stuff. But you're 100% right, and this will come up later. The Mets are like very incentivized if they win game 1 to lose game 2, which is so weird. All of it is. But that's another layer on this thing.
It is. It's very weird. I mean, I joked. I'm like, are we sure the Braves and the Mets can't do a little conference call and each team forfeit one of these games, because that would save a ton of travel.
Somebody asked us on Twitter today. They're like, can the Braves just and look, man, that'd be great for everybody involved. I don't think that Rob Manfred is going to sign off on a dual forfeit that would have. By the way, Monday's the only baseball action happening on Monday is this doubleheader. This is I almost used a more derogatory term. This is a dream for Major League Baseball in a vacuum, not for the Braves and Mets, but for like attention purposes, entertainment purposes. They're probably thrilled that these games are happening on Monday.
Yeah. I mean, if I was a neutral baseball fan, I'd be all for it. If the Dodgers and the Padres were playing this same situation, you can bet I'd be tuned in. Middle of a workday on a Monday. Let's hope that Truist is rocking and packed and give the team a boost. But we talked a minute ago about vibes. I think the analyst side of me says the Braves only need 1 out of 2, and New York is not really incentivized to go all out in both games. If the worst happens and they win game 1, I think the fan side of me is like absolutely terrified of I am not a Atlanta sports fan across the board. I picked up the Braves from my dad who grew up in Georgia. And then, of course, growing up in the Midwest on TBS basically every single night, like so many other fans across the country. But as a Braves fan, I have seen some stuff, Brad. And I think even if the logic says that it's going to be okay and they're going to find a way to get into the postseason, I'm going to be an anxious, nervous wreck on Monday until the Braves win one of those 2 games.
Yeah, I think one of the overriding ethos of this podcast almost for the 4 of us is kind of like we try to be analytical, we try to be smart about our discussions. We're also emotionally invested in the team to varying degrees, various reasons, et cetera, et cetera. So you're always weighing that. But this is a perfect situation where right now Fangraphs has this one projection as the Braves with an 81.9% chance to get in the playoffs, which basically means win one of the 2 games. And by the way, that makes total sense to me logically. If the Braves are at home, they're probably a slight favorite in each game based on just like what you would imagine. So if you add that up and say, what's the chances of the Braves winning one of these 2 games as a slight favorite? And then they're not even factoring this in. What we just acknowledged is like the Mets might even not try hard to lose game 2, but not be incentivized to go all out. That makes sense to me. And then also there's a side of my brain that's like, if they lose game 1, You got Chris Sale in game 2, and we'll talk about that. That is obviously a nice backstop to have. The best pitcher on the planet this season, basically. Maybe Tarek Skubal has an argument, but top 2 in the world this year. Nice to have that guy behind you, but no one in the general area of the city / state of Georgia or whatever is going to be very comfortable if it has to get to a must-win game 2. So,
yeah,
there's the vibe, Scott. That's a good way to start the podcast, I think, in some ways. All right, let's take a second now and dive into the game on Sunday. But first, a break, and we'll be right back with more on this situation. All right, Scott, let us dive in now briefly, or briefly for us. We're never brief, you and I, basically. But Sunday's game was interesting. It was not the most fun. We can start here. Now, we have the benefit of hindsight, so if you want to use it, you certainly can. A topic we were asked about a lot, both before the game, to be fair, and then, of course, during and after, is should the Braves have started Charlie Morton on Sunday? And I almost want to absolve myself. Everyone knows how I feel about Charlie, so I'm going to ask you. You're much more rational on Charlie than I am, I would imagine. What do you think about this, before, during, after, and how, of course, after we know how it all went?
Yeah, I tweeted, I was not on the show with you on Saturday night, and you did the Lord's work doing a 20-minute solo pod on a Saturday night at midnight. But I agreed with the decision. If I was the manager of the Braves, and dear God, I would have picked Charlie Morton for a couple of reasons. Charlie, for the most part, has pitched well over the last month, and because of everything going on, the Braves knew that if they won or if Arizona lost, they were in the playoffs, and they would have the enormous advantage then of not having to burn Chris Sale or Spencer Schwellenbach before the wild card round. And it's been a real fine line of not putting the cart before the horse this week with how the Braves have managed the rotation. So far, I would say it's worked out. I mean, we'll get into the game, but the reason the Braves lost on Sunday was not Charlie Morton. It was a really bad start, and then it was smooth sailing from there on the pitching side. Really, it was. The Braves lost that game because they couldn't hit, which is the theme for this entire season. And now, let's flip it. Let's say the Braves pitched Chris Sale today and they lost. All of a sudden, you don't have Sale for game 2 on Monday, and you wouldn't have Sale for the wild card round, which not great. So they have played this in hindsight now. I think they've played it right, and it's unfortunate now that they have to go to Schwellenbach on Monday because that means he would not be able to start one of the 3 wild card games. But you have to get there first. And God, let's sincerely hope they win game 1, because if they need 2 games, then they do not have Schwellenbach or Sale in the wild card round, and that's not great, to put it lightly.
No, it's not. And you're right. There's this delicate dance the Braves have been doing for the last week of you don't want to nuke yourself for the playoffs, but you have to get in, and getting in is more important. And I've said that in so many different responses on Twitter, on whatever social media apps, on our YouTube comments. Like, you have to get in. And honestly, I didn't like, and even said it, I didn't like them doing the we'll use Chris Sale when we need him thing. I actually didn't like that. And to this point, as you just said, it has worked. Max was lights out on Friday. They went on Saturday. So to this point, it's worked out very well for them. You're hoping you don't have to use Sale on Monday. But yeah, I think no matter what you think about Charlie, and I know I'm higher on him than most, I think it's objectively fair and true to say Charlie has been fine this season. And he's been pretty good the last 6 weeks. That's not really up for debate. The numbers tell the story. He's been pretty good for a while. He's not been great this season. He's not the guy he used to be. We say that all the time. Even I acknowledge that. He's not Charlie Morton in capital letters anymore. He's not. He's 4 years old. He's a perfectly fine guy to throw in this game. He was better than the guy the Royals threw in this game. The Royals, in fact, pulled back their Cy Young candidate Cole Reagans in this game because the game didn't mean anything to the Royals. And I will avoid doing the 20-minute version of this rant, but I've been talking about it all day on social media. Yeah, Charlie had a bad first inning. He did. He allowed 3 runs. The way that this is being discussed is the Braves were down 9-0. It was Fulte against the Cardinals.
Ooh.
They were down 3-0. The game's not over at that point. And I understand this is the offense. You said it already. The offense was the problem in this game. And maybe there's a vibes case. I saw this, and I will at least listen to it, that psyche-wise or approach-wise, whatever, it's harmful when you go down 3-0. I'll listen to that, but it's 3-0. It's not 8-0. It's not 10-0. And the Braves should be able to score 4 runs, and they didn't score 4. I guess a team throwing a fill-in starter, they had nothing to play for. The Royals are pretty good, but this is not the full capital letter Royals in this game either. So,
yeah,
like Charlie wasn't great. He gave them a chance. The bullpen was really good once they came in, and I'll give the number. I know Steve's been tracking this all year long as well, but the Braves, including today, are now 11-57 when the opponent scores 4 runs or more. One more time, 11-57. The Braves have won 16% of their games when their opponents score 4 runs or more. Not 7 runs, 4 runs. In comparison, and granted, this was an elite offense, so I will acknowledge that. Last year, the Braves were 43-51 when the opponent scored 4 runs. So, like, I will acknowledge you're supposed to lose more often than not when you give up 4 runs or more. That's fair. What you're not supposed to do is lose 84% of the time when you give up 4 runs. So it's the season wrapped up in a nutshell. Like the Royals, and I tracked this today. The Royals had a 119 expected batting average in the game today. They literally hit the ball, and I'm not exaggerating here. It's gonna sound like I am, and I'm not. They hit the ball hard-ish 3 times in 9 innings. Yeah. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. Look at the StatCast data. They hit the ball hard 3 times in a 9-inning game, and the Braves lost.
Again, it's kind of fitting that
the Braves, it's very fitting.
If the Braves would have lost today like 10-8, which is a very, very rare game that this team has had to play this year, I mean, you could probably count on one hand the number of time like 15 runs or more were scored. It would have been a little different. But you're right, man. I mean, the offense did not show up. There had opportunities, but could not cash in. And I agree with everything you said on Charlie. Was he awesome? No, but He did his job. He gave the team a chance to win. And then the bullpen was also excellent, which has been very much the case. I don't even know if the bullpen gave up more than like 1 base runner in their innings of work. Maybe 2.
Holmes and Daysbell, and I'll bring up Holmes later for another reason, but they struck out like, I want to say it was like 8 batters in a row at one point. Like they were just mowing people down.
Yeah, it should have been. I mean, it should have been enough. And maybe now we'll talk about the offense. But other than a Gio Urshela home run, there was really nothing to be excited about. Maybe we should also talk a little bit about lineup construction and a very, very glaring issue right now with a player who's getting a ton of important at bats. And look, man, there's a lot of issues with this lineup right now, but it has not been good for Ozzie Albies in the 7-8 games since he's come back, and it's being felt. Like every game, it feels like, man, Ozzie had a chance here, Ozzie had a chance there. If he would have gotten a hit, the game feels different. It's been very, very bad. I believe he is 4 for 31 since coming off the IL. 1 extra base hit, 1 walk, and he had opportunity, as did some of his other teammates on Sunday. And as has been the case in a lot of baseball games this year, just nobody could get that big hit to break it open.
Yeah, we'll talk about Ozzie, but they left 8 on base today. They were 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position in the game, and a sparkling 1 for 19 in the series. If that's all you knew about a series, you're supposed to lose the series. The Braves won this series. They won the series. 1 for 19 with runners in scoring position. So that's almost fortunate in itself.
If you told me on Friday morning the Braves were going to go 1 for 19 with runners in scoring position, I would have said one game was probably a miracle. Because I mean, that's again 1 for 19, 1 hit over 3 baseball games with runners in scoring position,
and it was today, and they lost. It was today,
right. Yeah, and it was I think it was Ramon Laureano had a ground ball up the middle that snuck through, but and obviously, I mean, it's not like you can only score when you have runners in scoring position. Had the heroics from d'Arnaud last night and home runs from Urshela and a couple others this weekend, but again, fitting that here we are doing the show instead of celebratory, talking about all of the crazy things this team had to overcome. And hey, maybe we do that podcast 24 hours from now, and God, let's hope. But in some ways, this was like the 50th time the Braves have lost this exact game this season. And, now they have to care on Monday. Whereas if things would have been different, they would have been able to pop the champagne tonight and be hungover and play 18 innings, presumably tomorrow.
Yeah, one more thing before we talk about Ozzie. They also made 2 massive outs on the bases today. Base running was a problem. Arcia in the 3rd inning gets thrown out at third base, which you don't ever really want to do. And then Soler gets thrown out at home in the 4th. Just bad. Like you don't want to see that. And look, they might have lost anyway, but when you already can't hit and you're already having these problems scoring runs, and I think Steven had, or maybe you hit somebody had this today, like even the runs they score over the weekend to win these games were like pretty fortunate. There was some errors. There were some like little things that happened to go the Braves' way, which is nice. And yes, some solo home runs, but you cannot also be bad on the base pass. If you're not going to hit, you got to run well. You got to do little things well, and they didn't do that at all today. They had a couple of threats down the stretch. They had guys on in the 8th and the 9th, etc. But you talked about Ozzie. Let's do this segment now quickly. So I've always kind of defended Ozzie. I've always been kind of high on Ozzie, all these things. And Ozzie has always been, this is true, an elite hitter against left-handed pitching. Always. That's always been the case. He had the injury, right? But even he's never been that good of a hitter against right-handed pitching. Even when he was able to swing fully and be a switch hitter and had the platoon advantage, now he's lost the platoon advantage. He also is clearly rusty. He had no rehab, all these things. And suddenly, and I know Steve's talked about it a lot on their side of our podcast, but why in the world, Scott, is Ozzie hitting second against righties? Like, I don't understand even the thought process of doing that. And today, you mentioned it already about how he keeps coming up. We've been joking about Orlando Arcia kind of finding these plate appearances where we don't want him to be. It was Ozzie today. It was like, oh, Ozzie's up again. And fittingly, Ozzie makes the last out of the game today, batting second. And it's like, why is he in that slot? And I love Ozzie, but like it doesn't make any sense at all. It just doesn't.
Yeah. And let's be clear right off the top. There are like 3 good hitters in this lineup, maybe 4, maybe 4.5, depending on if Jorge Soler is doing anything. So if they had like 9 good hitters and they had Ozzie batting second, I think it'd be even more egregious. And I get it, man. Like you're not batting Gio Urshela second. You're not batting the catcher second. You're not batting Orlando Arcia second. But literally anybody else, I would say, should be in the 2-hole other than Ozzie.
Especially against righties, again. Especially against righties.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make
it is a lineup that is heavily dominated by right-handed pitching or right-handed hitters right now. Especially with Ozzie not being a switch hitter, all you have is Matt Olson and Michael Harris. And that's something that I think the Braves need to try to figure out in the offseason, is get a little more balance in the lineup. But all of that down the road, man, they have to find a way to get the most out of the couple of hitters who are actually hitting the baseball right now, and putting Ozzie in the middle of Michael Harris, who's been awesome the last maybe week and a half, and then Ozuna and Olson and Laureano and Soler. Putting him in the middle of all that is just not conducive. I would put Soler there. I would put Laureano there. I would move Ozuna up and move Olson up. I mean, again, man, it's a little bit of like beggars can't be choosers because of the current situation with the lineup and all the injuries. But again, 4 for 31, 1 extra base hit, 1 walk. Even at his best, Ozzie Albies is a power hitting, low on base player. I mean, that's all he really is. And even when, like last year, when he was awesome, he was still like a 335 OBP guy. Dating back to 2020, he has a 313 on base percentage. So 5 seasons now, a 313 OBP. And then you add in the fact that he's basically playing on with one healthy wrist. It's just compounding the issue even more. And it felt like on Sunday, if there was maybe an LVP of the game, it was probably Ozzie Albies, because he had a lot of chances and just could not do anything.
Yeah, and I guess the lefty, you could talk me into it, because even recently, the post-injury record from Ozzie is not good enough to justify the 2-hole, even against the lefty. But you could say, look, we used to always make the Mike Trout comparison, basically call Ozzie Mike Trout when he bats right-handed, because it really was true. He was that good for like several seasons. So if you want to lean on that, I would understand it and put him there. And that's not crazy. I don't even know if I would do that, but like you could sell me. I guess righties, you can't sell me, especially. And look, there's this other conversation we could have if you want. Like Ozzie's kind of killing them on. He's not a good defender anymore. We kind of know that. And should he even be starting? I mean, should Whit Merrifield be playing? Because I don't know how seriously they would consider that, just because of the pedigree of Ozzie and the history and all those things. And I'm usually pretty cold and analytical, and I don't know if I would expect them to pull Ozzie Albies in must-win games when he is telling you he's healthy enough to play.
Yeah.
But there's also objectively, you could say, given the defense and the fact that Whit Merrifield will take a walk, he might just be better. And I don't know if they're going to do it, but would you consider it if you were suddenly all powerful, Scott, in the front office? Would you consider playing Whit on Monday, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, would I do it? Yes, but I'm also not a manager who has to be face to face with 26 players every single day. And Ozzie Albies holds a lot of weight in that clubhouse for good reason. This has been one of the better second basemen in the game for really since the day he debuted in 2017. Ozzie Albies carries a lot of weight and respect and is a veteran in that clubhouse. So do I think Whit Merrifield is going to be at second base on Monday? No. But if Ozzie's not going to hit and he's not going to get on base and he plays worse defense than Whit Merrifield and he's slower than Whit Merrifield, like what do you have at that point? It's been a bad first 10 days since he's come back, and who knows? I mean, I think there is probably some argument for you keep getting him at bats and hope that he settles in, because he missed almost 2 full months with the injury. That's a lot to come back from. But it is it is not great, and I would not bat him second, because it feels like, I mean, it's arguably the most important position in the lineup, analytically speaking. And when you have maybe your 6th best hitter in the order batting second, you're going to feel it. And even if he is kind of your more traditional number 2 hitter, it's not 1995 anymore where your middle infielder has to bat second.
Yeah, and we'll move on from this, but we are definitely in agreement, if nothing else, that according to what we know, we'll get into this in a second, like the Mets are probably going to start 2 righties. If both games matter, the guys that are lined up for them are both right-handed pitchers, we think. We definitely agree you cannot hit Ozzie second on Monday. And that doesn't mean Snit's not going to do it, but if it's up to us, that's the one thing that I think is kind of the bare minimum, is just move him down. That's an easy thing. It's less drastic than taking him out of the lineup altogether. If you want to kind of thread the needle, just do not hit him second against righties. And maybe we'll do this whole conversation in typical fashion. He'll bomb in his first plate appearance on Friday. Monday.
Oh.
That'd be cool with us. I'm just saying.
Walk off Ozzie Albies hit guaranteed, like in the next 72 hours.
Against the righty too, just to top it all off.
And then he pulls out our pictures from his back pocket and flips us off on national TV. Yeah, totally. And that's fine, man. If that's what it takes to get a win, that's cool. But no, I mean, I think in all seriousness, we will see. I'm curious to see if there's any kind of change. I'm leaning towards no. But in the biggest, I mean, we have seen in recent years, the Braves have altered the lineup in the playoffs to, I think, the dismay of a lot of folks. I mean, we've questioned it on the show of you've had this regular lineup for in prior years, basically every day for 6 months. And then the playoffs come around and all of a sudden they're moving pieces and it's like, whoa, what are you doing? Don't, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It is broke in this case, or it's at least worth trying to fix. And we will see. Okay,
Scott, it's that fateful time when we talk about Monday in some depth, right? Let's begin with the starting pitching and logistics. We said it before, but it's 2 games to win 1 for the Braves. They got to play both of them no matter what. But if you win the first one, the second one, just a big celebration. And all you're trying to do if you win the first one is just get through the second one. Save your best pitchers, all those things. But we cannot do a podcast between games. There's not enough time. So we'll just say that out loud now. Game 1 is going to be special Schwellenbach. They've announced that. All indications are if the Braves were to lose Game 1, it will be Chris Sale in Game 2, because the Braves have said multiple times this week that they were saving Sale for a win or go home basically situation, and that the only time that will happen this week maybe is the second game on Monday. The Mets have not announced their starters at this point, either one of them. It seems like Severino is going to pitch one of them for New York. The Mets beat writers that we can find are projecting him to pitch Game 1, but not in any official capacity as we're recording this podcast at like 8 p.m. Eastern time. They could do what the Braves are doing with Sale and hold him. The other option is Tyler McGill. So basically the Mets, people that are smarter than us around the Mets Up podcast we did a crossover with this week, their beat writers, they're all guessing it's some combination of Severino and McGill. Both righties, not like Severino's pretty famous, but not dominant guys. They've had a good year, but they're both pretty good pitchers. Not a massive advantage for Schwellenbach. If it's Sale, then that's an advantage. But anything strike you about either one of them that's like worth noting? Because obviously it's going to be high profile, and presumably everyone will be on a short leash in this game on both sides because they're kind of, especially game one, it's a must win for both teams. But what are you envisioning?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just thinking about how you manage game one, because both teams very clearly want to win game one.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if it's Tyler McGill against Spencer Schwellenbach, which is, I think, maybe the guess. I don't know. We'll see what New York does. But the clear advantage for both teams, if you don't have to pitch Sale and you don't have to pitch Severino, you have them for game one on Tuesday in the wild card round. But you got to get there first. And I would love to know what's being said on the team plane for the Mets right now, because they have a real decision to make. And they know, because based on what the Braves have done, they know for a fact that Schwellenbach is game one and Sale, the Cy Young winner, is going to be game two. I wonder if that factors into their decision making, where maybe New York really tries, like pushes every button imaginable for game one, which is kind of the opposite of what the Braves are going to do, at least in terms of their starter. I mean, we could probably have an hour-long discussion on the pros and cons. But we've seen Severino a few times this year. Got hit pretty hard a week ago in game one of the game on Tuesday night. And Tyler McGill was injured for a while, but he's been very good in the month of September. I believe his ERA is below 2 across 5 starts. And, he's a somebody. I mean, this is not New York throwing a AAA guy out to the Wolves. So it is going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out. And, there's that real fine line of playing for both the wild card, but also trying to win one of these two games. And both teams know that depending on who wins game one, that team is not going to care literally at all about game two, other than maybe, clubhouse bragging rights. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what these two teams decide to do.
Yeah, game two, because at least for the Braves, the Mets, in theory, if they for some reason would just rather be the 5 seed, they could still try in game two. They wouldn't try super hard, I don't think. They're not going to pitch Severino if they hold him. But they might have some incentive if they decide they'd rather win. The Braves, the game literally means nothing. If the Braves win game one, they are locked into the 5 seed. There's nothing that changes whatsoever. And then it's just get through the game. But yeah, I mean, the Braves already made their decision in some respects on how they're going to approach game one. Since Friday. I mean, Snit basically said to the media Thursday when they announced Free was going to pitch Friday that they were going to hold Sale. And there's this shroud of mystery, is Sale 100% healthy? All these things because of the way the last start went with Sale. And we're not trying to be negative. It's just because the last time we saw Chris Sale, he was not 100%. And that just causes some, not saying a ton, some level of what's going on here? The Braves have been saying all the right things. They're just trying to hold their guy for the end, and that's fine. Even if I didn't love it in the first place, it's worked. But Schwellenbach's been pitching great. So it's not like I'm uncomfortable with Schwellenbach on the mound. He is a rookie, yes, but he's pitched in a bunch of big spots. This is the biggest spot, to be sure, but he's done the job. He's not shrunk at all. He's been comfortable. He's been really good. So he just pitched great against the Mets, the same team, on Tuesday. We did that crossover podcast after the game, and the Mets guys were like, hey, Schwellenbach's really good. I'm like, yeah, I know. He's really good. So I feel good about that. The only other thing that I would want to bring up, other than lineup stuff with Ozzie, which we already talked about, is not trying to be a downer, but you got to pitch, you got to navigate 2 games, and that is always a tax on your bullpen, right? And your pitching depth in general, especially when we're back to that towing the line thing about you got to play the next day. If the Braves advance, they got to play the next day and the next day and the next day. And they can't worry about that, but it is a factor. They've been able to hold their best guys out the last couple of days. That's really good. There's not been, at least not hold them out entirely, but for instance, today, Iglesias was off, Jimenez was off. Those guys will be fresh, right? But it's hard to pitch guys twice in the same day. It's not unprecedented, but it's hard to do. This is maybe just me that's bothered by this. I don't know why they threw Grant Holmes today. And I get it. He pitched really well. It's not about Grant, but he got 5 outs. He's the long reliever on the team. He's been starting for them. You have a doubleheader tomorrow. And by the way, you might have a full-on bullpen game on Tuesday, and you use your long reliever today, get 5 outs. I don't really understand that, especially because I'm not trying to be negative, Scott, but I'll ask you this. What happens if Spencer Schwellenbach has a blow-up in the first inning of game 1? They don't have a bolt guy to pitch. Like, Grant Holmes is going to be – I'm sure he'll be able to pitch tomorrow, but he's not throwing 4 innings after he pitched today. That's not happening, I don't think. Jesse Chavez, like you just try to wear it. Like, how do you now? I'm not trying to be negative, but when you got to get through 2 games, it's stuff you got to think about. Because one more thing we should say out loud, and then I'll let you answer. There's no extra pitcher in this scenario. I know most of the year you get the free 27th man. It's always a pitcher. You bring a guy up for depth purposes. At the end of August, that stops happening because you already have an expanded roster. So, like, there's no cavalry coming automatically where you could just call up Bryce Elder or AJ Smith-Shawver or whoever to be that guy for you. Now, there's some roster stuff you could do, which I'll let you weigh in on if you want to. But at the moment, they don't really have a natural, like, break glass, in case of emergency, long man to pitch in game 1 or game 2 if they had to get that far.
I mean, I think they could figure it out.
Sure.
Well, to answer your first question, if Schwellenbach gets destroyed in game 1, I want to be – I'll open the tequila bottle at 2 PM because.
But logistically though, do you just punt? Do you just punt? Like, okay, let's say it's 6-0 at the end of the first inning. Do you just say, "All right, Jesse, take us home. We're saving Chris Sale for the night game," or do you, or do you try to hold it there and try to make a comeback? Obviously, you're always trying to make a comeback, but you know what I mean. There's punting and not punting in that aspect. Maybe if it's 4-0, there's degrees here. It's hard to anticipate the situation, but it's so complicated. Because it's 2 games and it's the next day. And I think that's the smallest calculation is being ready to go on Tuesday because you just got to get there first. But in my mind, there's got to be a little bit of like, all right, man, are we going to kill ourselves before this playoff series? I don't know. It's so weird.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume that Holmes would be available tomorrow if they absolutely needed him. Jesse Chavez can go multiple innings. Luke Jackson can go multiple innings. Aaron Bummer has gone more than an inning. Dylan Lee can do it. So there are ways to kind of figure it out. The one
you do it twice. it's 2 games.
Well, I mean, if both Schwellenbach and Sale both get obliterated, then I'm going to go MIA for 3 weeks. But there is something we should talk about on the show because there is a world where the Braves make another roster move on Monday. And it involves Charlie Morton, and Brad, I'll kind of tee up from there, but it would involve removing Charlie Morton from the active roster, which would also remove Charlie from the active roster for both the wild card round and the division round, I believe. So let's at least speak about this in case the roster move happens on Monday morning.
Yeah, I mean, I'll actually credit Steven, who's been talking about this offline to us. It would probably be a phantom IL. I don't think that they're going to just DFA Charlie Morton. Like, that's not going to happen. No. But you could phantom IL Charlie and create a spot that way, and you wouldn't have Charlie anymore. But the reason why this is coming up, and we're not like suggesting this is going to happen or that it's likely, is that if you look ahead, there isn't a lot of use for Charlie for a while. Like, he can't realistically pitch in the wild card round. Other than maybe in a relief effort, which he hasn't really done much of for a very long time. He's 40 years old, all those things. Because he pitched today. So he couldn't pitch again until Friday. And that's the next series if you get there. And by that point, you're hopefully resetting. And as much as I love him, he's their 5th starter right now. And generally, you don't use 5 starters in the playoffs. You use 4, if that. Sometimes it's 3. So maybe you piggyback him and use him with Ronaldo or something down the stretch. That might happen. I'm not saying he has no use at all, but if you're trying to be cold and calculated, he doesn't help you in the wild card round. So if there was a way, without getting the ire of the league, to subtly IL him or whatever, that's an idea to create a roster spot to bring somebody else up that has a fresh arm for the next couple of days. Smith-Shawver, Elder, whoever you want to say it is. Man, I hope it's not Elder. Sorry, Bryce.
Catching strays on the show tonight.
I mean, you said it earlier. Didn't you?
I did. Yeah. I mean,
sorry, Bryce.
it's definitely far-fetched, but it is
Well, there's a way
mentioning.
that's not as far fetched that we should talk about. Like they could just option Daysbell. Like he has an option. Like Grant Holmes doesn't have an option. He's good anyway, but like he pitched today. They could DFA Jesse, which they're not going to do, I don't think, just for the vibes. Like you could argue, I would argue much more seriously for DFAing Jesse or Luke Jackson personally, but they're not going to do that, I don't think, for the same reason, like just the vibes based. I can't imagine a team with Ryan Snicker would probably lay down in front of Alex's door tomorrow morning before he let them DFA Jesse on the eve of this. I can't imagine that happening. Maybe I'll be wrong, or they just go to Jesse like, Jesse, we need you to do us a solid. We're going to DFA you. But I think if they make a roster move, it'll be Daysbell being optioned. That's my best guess. Do you disagree?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's probably right. I'm going to guess they don't ultimately do anything with the roster tomorrow because, I mean, again, is it impossible that Schwellenbach and Sale both get lit up? No, it's not impossible, I guess. But overall, I think they just run it back. You hope that Schwellenbach gives them another good start. The bullpen has really not had to pitch a ton over the last week because of the rainouts and all that. So I think the Braves will just kind of keep it as is and just take it truly inning by inning and see how it goes. And with a little bit of luck, after 9 innings, they will be victorious. And then everybody can get one of those little like mini glasses of champagne that they serve at dinner functions. And everybody can drink that in the dugout while the second game happens.
I have one more question logistically on Monday that I'll ask you that we didn't prep for, so apologies. We are, for people that are new listeners, we are very much a proponent, generally speaking, I don't want to speak for you, but I think we agree on this, of like being quite aggressive with your pitching plan in playoff scenarios, like not leaving starters in too long, all that stuff. Like it's a different world in the playoffs. And functionally, Monday begins the playoffs for the Braves. It's not a playoff game, but it is.
Yeah.
I say all that. How short of the leash would you have Spencer on in game 1? Just because you do have the backup of Sale in game 2, but you have the bullpen concern. The bullpen, I don't want to say concerns, but like limitations. Like you don't want to, if you could help it, you don't want to light your bullpen on fire in game 1. So obviously we can't be specific right now without knowing. But would you treat Spencer like it's a playoff game, which means like by the end of the 3rd inning, you're like kind of on pins and needles? Because that's generally how I feel about the playoffs, especially for like non-super aces, is that once you get to the second time through the order, it starts to be a little bit dicey.
Mm-hmm.
Would you do that, or would you kind of treat this like a pretty normal start for Spencer?
I would treat it somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, obviously playoff games get managed differently. I wouldn't go that extreme just because you do have the backup of game 162 and game 2. Say that things are not going well. You know that you have Chris Sale and you have a Mets team with nothing to really play for, and Lindor would sit out and Alonso would sit out and Nimmo would sit out. So I mean, at the first glance of trouble in the 3rd inning for Schwellenbach, am I moving heaven and earth to get the bullpen in? No. But it's also a situation where obviously Brian Snitker needs to be aware of the importance of the game and the importance of not having to play game 2 with anything on the line, because stuff happens, as we saw today, and against a Royals team that really didn't have much to play for either. So to answer your question, no, I would not overmanage the game. I would just kind of maybe have Rick Cranitz sit next to the bullpen phone so you are ready to go at a moment's notice. But no, I would not be as extreme as, you say hard, he's going to face the lineup once or he's going to face the lineup twice, and then you pull him. Because there is the balancing act of you don't necessarily want to have to burn every single arm in your bullpen in game 1, especially if it hangs in the balance, which is another kind of interesting wrinkle. Like, just how hard do you push? The easy answer is the Braves score 9 runs and it doesn't really matter.
I was gonna say a lot of it's game state. We just can't answer that right now. But like, if you're up 5-0, you treat it differently than if it's 1-0 or you're down 1-0 or whatever it's going to be. Like we agree. I think it's somewhere in the middle in a vacuum, which is all we have right now, is that I would be more aggressive than Snit typically is with his pitchers, given these stakes. But also, I don't think it's full on playoff mode because of what you said. I do think that once you get through the second time of the order, I think unless he is, I mean, at that point, first base runner for me is that's probably it. And the third time through the order, I mean, because the penalty, there's been I know people don't believe in this, but the numbers tell you over and over and over again, third time through the order, every pitcher's worse. Everyone, even the elite guys are worse, but especially the non-elite. And Spencer has been really good, but he's not elite at this point, I wouldn't say. So I'm not saying you have to take him out right away, but any sign of trouble past the second time through the order, I would be in the bullpen. Let's just say. And also, this is stuff that we can't possibly know, and we always acknowledge that when there are things that we can't possibly know. The Braves know which relievers on their team that might be able to go twice in the same day. And we don't really know that. Like, do they think that Rysel can pitch in both games? I have no idea. Same with, and they're not going to tell us because, usually in a normal situation, you would never want to pitch a reliever twice in the same day, because I know it sounds like it's the same day, but there's 3 hours between appearances, 4 hours. I mean, like, it's not normal at all for a guy to warm up, pitch, warm down, warm back up, and pitch in the same day. It doesn't really happen that way. So can they do that? Who can do that? We don't know. Holmes, like limits on Holmes and Daysbell, guys that pitch today. Can they go tomorrow? Probably, but they pitched more than an inning. Daysbell and Holmes did. So like, usually that would be like kind of a stay away the next day. If a guy throws 2 innings, it's like, oh, probably not anymore. Like, they probably got to pitch tomorrow. So there's always stuff we just can't possibly know. And obviously the Braves are not going to be rushing to tell us because they want to maintain that advantage.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the box score. I don't believe anybody pitched both Saturday and Sunday. So presumably everyone's available. And I mean, I would argue unless someone had pitched 3 days in a row, I would argue that everybody is available.
Oh, yeah.
And
they went on this rabbit hole today with somebody in my mentions, and I wasn't trying to be like difficult. Bring up the Holmes thing. Like, I was more confused. Not that he's going to be unavailable tomorrow, but I do think that Grant Holmes pitching today means he can't throw 4 innings tomorrow. That's kind of all I was saying about it. Like, it's a very, very minor thing, and I understand that. But I'm just thinking about doubleheader, and let's say you get down for whatever reason big, like you usually would throw your long guy and say, all right, take us home. And they can't really do that as easily when he pitched 20-something pitches today. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes. And I think
maybe they can. I don't know. Maybe it's the playoffs, and you just, and again, I'm saying playoffs. It is the playoffs functionally for the Braves. Maybe it's this. All right, Grant, leave it out there for us, please. So, we could do scenarios all day long. Game 1's the big one. Hopefully it's all settled by the time game 1 is over. The Braves have been pretty clear about this. If they win game 1, game 2 is going to be, they're not going to say this, but Sale's not pitching game 2 if they win game 1. We all kind of understand that. Sale will be held till Tuesday. And I would love to do a lot. We're not going to do this because I have to work, and so do you and everybody else, but it'd be fun to do a live game 2 podcast only if they won game 1. Wouldn't that be fun? Just like the schadenfreude of what game 2 might be if they win game 1. Again, if they win game 1, because they're not huge favorites.
Winning game 1 takes the edge off of everything.
Of course.
Because they're in the playoffs. And let's hope. I know we've probably spent the last 15 minutes talking about more negative scenarios than positive ones. Let's hope the Braves, after a pretty disappointing weekend, offensively at least, winning 2 out of 3, and all the help they got from New York and Arizona on Friday and Saturday was awesome. Like 99th percentile in terms of, I mean, you said it perfectly. It was a perfect scenario for the team on Friday and Saturday. Obviously, that was not perfect on Sunday, but you told me a week ago that the Braves would have a chance to win 1 out of 2 games, and they were in the playoffs, even if the travel's kind of funky, even if maybe the pitching isn't lined up perfectly. Just get into the playoffs and see what happens. You never know. And, the other side of this would be an Arizona fan where you're hoping that one of these 2 teams wins both.
Sweeps. Yeah.
When one of them guaranteed will have nothing to play for after game 1. If you're looking for the silver lining or the bright side or being optimistic, the Braves control their own fate. They have 2 games at home with probably their 2 best starting pitchers in the second half in terms of performance, with Schwellenbach and Sale. Obviously, Max Fried is awesome, but just from a statistical standpoint, Schwellenbach and Sale have both been like top 10 starters since June. It's not like they're having to start Grant Holmes in game 1 and Charlie Morton in game 2. Things are lined up about as well as they can be. and you just have to hope they go out there, they take care of business in game one. But even if they don't win game one and they end up winning game two behind Chris Sale, you're in the playoffs. You see what happens. San Diego is a good team, but they are, weird things happen come October in the playoffs, and
Certainly.
you just got to get there first.
Yeah, hopefully 24 hours from now, some combination of the four of us is doing a podcast to wrap up Monday and preview the Pod Race. We're all hoping for that. There are positive scenarios. Like, obviously, if they get a comfortable win in game one, it's just save everybody in game two. Luke and Jesse. It's just a parade. It's a lot of fun in game two, and also, I want to be careful not to overrate the nothing to play for thing, because we've seen in baseball, like, guys are going to try, and like the Diamondbacks lost a couple games this weekend to a team with nothing to play for. The Braves lost a game today to a team with nothing to play for. So like, it's not like to go back to the sport that I cover also, in basketball, you can sit your best players and pretty much automatically lose. If you want to just sit your best players, the drop off in basketball, or like in the NFL, if you want to rush your quarterback, that's a 10-point line move, whatever it's going to be. In baseball, it's not quite that. So whoever's playing is going to be trying. So in that disaster scenario where the Braves lose game one, it's not like it's going to be a layup, but the actual ace in the hole, Chris Sale, kind of helps to level the playing field. So I feel okay. Will I feel okay at 1:30 tomorrow? Who's to say, Scott? But at this moment, after talking this through with you for 50 minutes or so, my analytical side is taking over. 2 chances to win one game. I believe the Braves are going to be favored in each game individually. And if you combine those 2 outcomes, probability-wise, you are a big favorite to win one of them. That is what I'll be telling myself as I try to go to bed tonight and I'm unable to sleep. Yeah. The Braves are favored in each game.
there might be some restless sleep for all of us tonight. Massive games on the horizon. You're right. These are basically playoff games. It's a little weird because it's like a best of 2. And in the case of going 1-1, everybody is happy.
Everybody wins. Sorry, yeah, Diamondbacks, man. Your Arizona Diamondbacks, as we make that joke for the 17th consecutive episode. But I would hate to be the Diamondbacks right now, and it's their own fault. They skidded this week. It's entirely on them. We can joke around about like some of the stuff that's been said, but like they had so many chances to ensure their playoff destiny, and they did not take advantage of them this week. So it's their fault. But man, it would be brutal to be a Diamondbacks fan. Have to root. You have no interest in the first game at all, really. And it's like, all right, whoever wins the first game, we want you to win again. Yay.
I will say, on the point of nothing to play for, let's say this, Brad. Braves win game 1. Braves win game 2 and eliminate the Mets from the playoffs. That would be
so now that people are already logged off the podcast, our actual thought about this. Sorry to the Mets.podcast, our new friends who we met on Tuesday. Me and Steven had a good time with those guys. They're nice guys, I will say that. There will be a twinkling in my heart if the Braves can eliminate the Mets in game 2. That would be very nice. I don't know. It's a secondary concern. As much as I do not like the Mets and never have in my entire life, playoffs, getting the playoffs is number 1 by a wide margin. But once that's done, if it is, keeping the Mets out would be nice. It'd be a nice cherry on top for Braves fans.
At least make them really sweat, like tying runner in the bottom of the 9th, whether it matters or not, because let's hope again, Braves take game 1. Chris Sale is getting mentally locked in for game 1 of a wild card round with the Padres. Schwellenbach is awesome. Offense wakes up, or at least just does enough to get a win. Let us kind of speak it into existence. It's 2 games. You need to win 1 at home. Pitching is lined up. The Mets have had a pretty crazy travel schedule the last couple of days. There are a lot of things working in Atlanta's favor. And God, man, let's hope they find a way to win. If not game 1, then game 2, because this team making the playoffs in and of itself, even if this team makes the playoffs and then gets crushed by San Diego for 2 games, which would suck. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's all fine. It would suck no matter when the Braves get eliminated from the playoffs. It's always a sad day. But just making the postseason for this team that has had to overcome so much since literally the 5th inning of opening day would be an incredible accomplishment, especially with how good the top half of the National League has been this year. I just like to think that this team finds a way to win tomorrow, gets into the playoffs, and then just, roll the dice and see what happens, because that is very much playoff baseball.
We are on the same page for sure. It would be awesome if they got in. We will cover it, win or lose. That is something we pride ourselves on this podcast. If things go terribly, terribly wrong on Monday, we'll still have a podcast. We're not going to bail on everybody. We're going to be there. It will be somber for sure, but it will be there. And hopefully it will not be that way. And we'll have plenty to discuss in the next few days. Scott, where can folks who might be finding us for the first time happen to find your work beyond this podcast?
Yeah, I am at Scott Coleman 55 on Twitter. We appreciate everybody tuning in, whether you're on YouTube, which is new for us, but we've had a lot of great feedback. So please do subscribe to the YouTube feed. Even if you're an audio only listener, hop over.
Especially if you are. Especially
Yeah.
if you are. We've been told the best thing you can do is subscribe on audio. But if you like YouTube, that's fine. But please also download the show on audio if you are a YouTube fan. Just for us. Try to support us that way. I'd be very much appreciated.
Yeah. It is a entirely free podcast. We don't ask for basically anything other than a follow and or a like or whatever it is. But yeah, we'll be here, rain or shine. Let's hope it is shining on Monday night. And then there's a whole bunch more of baseball on the horizon for this team. But yeah, a bummer that we could not do the celebratory show tonight. But 24 hours from now, let's say that let's hope that we're talking about the Padres and another fun series on the horizon.
Absolutely. And you should be following Scott on his Twitter feed as well. Follow our show on social media at Hammer Territory. We are on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. One day we'll be on TikTok, Scott. Not today, though. One day, perhaps, on TikTok for the show. Please follow me if you'd like to, at BT Rowland. And once again, our final plea on today's episode, please subscribe to the show. Please like the video. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video as you're watching it, and also follow and subscribe on that platform, ratings and reviews. And stay tuned. We will have a show on Monday evening. Hopefully it's an upbeat show, and stay tuned for that. We'll see you all next time.